The smell of antiseptic filled the room so completely that it felt like in my lungs. Every breath carried that sharp, sterile sting, as if the hospital itself wanted to burn the memory into my body. My son lay motionless on the narrow bed, tangled in a web of tubes and wires. Machines blinked and whispered around him, forcing air into his chest, pulling it back out again. Sebastian did not look asleep. He looked emptied, like the man erased that being quietly erased and replaced with a cell. The steady beeping of the monitor drilled into my head, each sound striking with cruel precision. Proof that his heart still worked. Proof that it could stop at any second. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed, flipping through papers with tired eyes. He had learned to read doctors' faces during these terrible weeks, and he knew what was coming before he spoke. There has been no change, he said quietly. The brain activity is barely measurable. We've done everything that medicine allows. Mine is weakened. He reached out and gripped the cold rail of the bed to stay upright. Camila, my daughter-in-law, clasped Sebastian's lifeless hand with both of hers. Her face was swollen from crying, her voice trembling as if it might break apart completely. Doctor, please, she sobbed. Remove the respirator. Don't let him suffer anymore. The moment those words left her mouth, it felt as if the air vanished from the room. I had prepared myself for this decision. I had whispered prayers for a miracle that never came. But hearing her ask to unplug him still chattered something deep inside me. She collapsed forward onto the bed, crying into his chest as if a cold still filled her. One by one the rest of the family nodded through their tears. They murmured about mercy. About dignity. About how long it had been. Their eyes shifted toward me with silent expectation. Someone touched my shoulder gently. It's time, a voice murmured. He looked at my son's face. His lips were pale, his eyes closed and lifeless. He raised a trembling hand and brushed back the hair that had fallen across his forehead. I opened my mouth to say yes. To give permission for the machine to be turned off. The single word caught in my throat like broken glass. And then I felt a small tug on my sweater. I turned in surprise. Emilio stood behind me, my 7-year-old grandson, his eyes red and swollen from crying. His small fingers clung tightly to my sleeve as if he were the only thing keeping him upright. He leaned toward my ear and whispered so softly that only I could hear it. Grandma. I have to tell you what Mommy did with Daddy's medicine. The words froze my blood. My chest tightened so violently I thought I might faint. The beeping of the monitor suddenly sounded louder, faster, unbearable. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. Someone asked what the child had said. Before I could answer, Camila lifted her head. The color drained from her face instantly. Her sobbing stopped as if someone had switched it off. Panic filled her eyes. What are you saying, Emilio? She demanded. She rushed forward and grabbed his arm. He cried out in pain as her fingers tightened around his small wrist. Red marks bloomed on his skin. He stepped toward her, but she was already pulling him backward toward the door. Mom, you're hurting me, he cried. Be quiet, she hissed, clamping her hand over his mouth. She dragged him out of the room as he kicked and struggled. His muffled sobs echoed down the hallway. Before the door slammed shut, she turned and forced a trembling smile. Is in shock, she said quickly. Children imagine things. Ella calmed him down. The door closed hard. The room sank into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The family looked at one another in confusion. The doctor turned back to me, waiting for my decision. But the woman standing there was no longer the broken mother ready to surrender. Something cold had awakened inside my chest. Fear mixed with suspicion. Whatever Emilio had been trying to say, and Camila's reaction, I knew it wasn't nothing. Continue the treatment, he said firmly. Do not remove the respirator. The doctor hesitated only briefly before adding and marking something on the chart. Murmurs spread through the room, but I didn't explain. I walked out into the hallway, my legs trembling beneath me. I leaned against the cold wall, trying to steady my breathing. Emilio's whisper replied in my mind. Camila's face, white with terror. The pieces fell thrown. But deep in my bones, I knew that what had happened to my son was not an accident. 6 months earlier, everything had looked perfect. I remembered that Sunday afternoon filled with sunlight and laughter. I had cooked pozole for Sebastian, his favorite. The smell of spices filled the kitchen warm and comforting. Camila smiled as she passed plates. Emilio showed his father a drawing of our family. Sebastian laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. I stood at the table and talked that life had finally rewarded me after all the loss I had endured. I did not know then that betrayal was already living under my roof. One night, I saw Camila standing on the balcony in the dark, whispering urgently into her phone. When she noticed me, she hung up in panic and forced a smile. Later, I found shredded bank papers in the trash with numbers too large to ignore. Sebastian began to change, withdrawn tense. Arguments drifted through the walls at night. I told myself it was none of my business. Now, standing in the hospital hallway with my heart pounding in my ears, I understood that mistake had nearly cost my son his life. And whatever truth my grandson was carrying in his small, terrified chest, I was going to uncover it, no matter how ugly it was. I did not return to Sebastian's room that night. I stood in the waiting area outside the intensive care unit, sitting on a hard plastic chair that dug into my back. Nurses walked past with quiet urgency, their footsteps soft but constant. Every now and then, I heard Camila's voice down the hallway as she spoke to someone in hurried whispers. She never once approached me. My thoughts repeated Emilio's words over and over, twisting them into 1,000 horrible possibilities. What medicine had meant? Sebastian had always carried his inhaler everywhere. His asthma attacks were sudden and brutal. That night 6 weeks ago I had called Camila during one such attack while driving home. I never made it back. His car was found pulled over on the side of the road. The inhaler lay under the seat, just out of reach. The doctors had said it was an unfortunate accident. But children did not invent details like that. Children told the truth plainly, without understanding how dangerous it was. Near dawn Camila passed the waiting area with quick steps. She pretended not to see me. I called her name, and she froze for a brief moment before turning back. You scared Emilio, I said quietly. She forced a tired smile. I was hysterical. Is a sensitive child. You know that. Sensitive, yes, I replied. A liar, no. Her eyes hardened for just a second before softening again. You're exhausted. Grief makes people imagine things. And guilt makes people panic, I said. For a moment we stared at each other. Then she turned and walked away without another word. When the morning light began to filter through the narrow windows, I went to find Emilio. I was sitting alone in the children's playroom, clutching a small toy car. His face was pale, his eyes red. When I saw me, I ran into my arms and buried his face against my chest. Mommy told me not to talk, I whispered. I held him close, my heart breaking. You're safe with me. You can't tell Grandma anything. I hesitated, trembling slightly. Daddy couldn't breathe. I called Mommy. I was in their room. Mommy was angry. She took Daddy's inhaler and kicked it under the bed. She said I was exaggerating and that she was tired of his drama. The room spun. My knees weakened and I sat down on the floor beside him, pulling him into my lap. My whole body felt cold. When Daddy didn't take me back home, Emilio continued, Mommy said I was being careless again. But Daddy always keeps his medicine. Always. He stroked his hair slowly, trying not to sob. The truth sat heavy and sharp in my chest. Camila had not only betrayed my son. She had almost killed him. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. Words from a frightened child were not enough to put someone in prison. And prison was exactly where she belonged. That afternoon I visited Sebastian's apartment. Camila had not returned since the hospital incident. The place looked untouched, as if time had simply paused. I went into their bedroom and dropped to my knees, reaching under the bed where Emilio had said the inhaler had been kicked. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. I pulled it out. The inhaler was empty. I took it to a pharmacy and asked them to check the serial number. It had been filled 2 days before Sebastian's collapse. It should have been nearly full. But it had been discharged completely wasted. Someone had intentionally released its contents. The realization made my hands shake. That was only the beginning. Over the following days I searched through every drawer, every folder, every device Camila had left behind. Sebastian had always trusted her with finances. Too much. What I found buried into the files chilled me even more than the murder attempt. There were bank transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Large sums withdrawn quietly over months. Investment records that Sebastian had never mentioned. Properties purchased under false names. Slowly, the picture took shape. Camila had not used tried to kill my son. She had been stealing from him for years. And she had been planting the idea of his death in everyone's minds long before he ever stopped breathing. When he returned to the hospital that night, Camila was there again, sitting by Sebastian's bed as if nothing had happened. Her hand rested lightly on his. She looked up in surprise when she saw me. How is he? She asked sweetly. Alive, he answered. For now. Her lips tightened briefly before relaxing again. You should let him go. Keeping him this way is cruel. It would be cruel to let a murderer decide his fate, he replied softly. Her eyes widened just a little too fast. What are you talking about? I found the inhaler, he said. I know what you did. She stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. You're unwell, she snapped. You're grieving. You ain't say anything. I'm not going to the police, he continued calmly. Not yet. She stared at me in confusion and fear. I want everything, he said. Every bank account. Every property deed. Every transaction you made in his name. If you cooperate, I might stay silent a little longer. Her face twisted with rage. You can't prove anything. I don't need to yet, he answered. I only need you afraid. For the first time since I had met her, Camila looked truly terrified. 3 days later, Sebastian's fingers moved. The nurses rushed in as the monitor spiked wildly. He pushed past them and grabbed my son's hand as his eyelids fluttered. His eyes struggled to open, confused and heavy with pain. Mom, he whispered weakly. Tears streamed down my face as he nodded. I'm here, my love. You're safe now. But even as he held him, he knew the real battle was only just beginning. Because Camila was desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. Sebastian's awakening sent a quiet shockwave through the hospital. Doctors moved more urgently, nurses whispered with cautious relief, and Dope, dangerous and fragile, slipped back into the room. He could not speak much at first. His throat was raw from the tube, his body weak from weeks of stillness. But his eyes were awake now, following movement, searching for familiar faces. When he looked at me there was confusion, fear and something else I had not expected, shame. Camila did not return that day. The next day either. By the third day, Sebastian finally whispered her name. He told him she was resting. It was the first lie I had ever told my son. That evening while nurses adjusted his medication, he gestured for me to lean closer. Mom, the attack, it wasn't like the others. What do you mean? He asked gently. I called Camila, he said. He told her he couldn't breathe. She was angry. She said he always ruined everything. He told her he needed my inhaler. She hung up. My hand tightened around his. And then I found it, he whispered. But it was empty. The final piece slid into place with sickening clarity. I did not know she had kicked it under the bed. I only knew it had fallen him at the worst possible moment. He closed his eyes tightly, tears leaking from the corners. He thought it was my fault. He thought I forgot to refill it. He kissed his forehead. It wasn't your fault. Later that night Camilla finally appeared. She walked into the room slowly, her face carefully painted with worry and relief. She rushed to Sebastian's side and took his hand, lowering her head as if overwhelmed with emotion. You scared me to death, she whispered. Sebastian looked at her silently. There was no relief in his eyes. Only a distant, aching confusion. I wanted to come earlier, she continued, still performing. But the shock was too much. I couldn't stand seeing you like that. I watched her closely. She never once looked at me. That night after she left, I returned home and continued digging. The deeper I went, the more rotten everything became. I discovered accounts open in Sebastian's name without his knowledge. Loans he had never approved. Documents forged so cleanly a casual glance would have missed it. Camilla had been building a second life behind his back, luxury, security, and escape, funded entirely by the man she was now pretending to mourn. And there was something else. Hidden emails. Encrypted messages. Conversations with a man named Daniel. They spoke in financial codes at first, then in naked intimacy. I stared at those words for a long time until the letters blurred through my tears. My son had been faithful. She had not. Daniel owned several of the shell companies drawn in Sebastian's accounts. They weren't just lovers. They were partners. The next morning I visited Daniel's office pretending to be a client. He was younger than I expected, confident, charming, and arrogant. When I asked about a recent property purchase under one of Camilla's aliases, his expression shifted just a fraction too slowly. Investment groups, he said smoothly. Nothing personal. Of course, I replied. Everything personal always hides behind business. That evening, I hired a private investigator. Within a week, the truth stood naked and undeniable. Daniel and Camilla had been planning to leave the country. Sebastian's life insurance policy had been increased 3 months before the attack. In Daniel's emails there were discussions about accelerating timelines and removing obstacles. They had not only tried to kill my son. They had planned his death. I returned to the hospital with copies of everything hidden inside my purse. Camilla was there again, stroking Sebastian's hair softly. When she saw me approach, her body stiffened. Leave us, I told her calmly. Sebastian looked between us. Ma'am. Just for a moment I assured him. Camilla rose slowly, her eyes dark with warning. Out in the hallway I handed her the first envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. As she flipped through the papers, her face drained of every trace of color. Where did you get this? She whispered. The truth is very patient, I said. It always waits for the right hands. You don't understand, she said urgently. Daniel forced me. I would have ruined us. I had no choice. You had many choices, I replied. You chose money. You chose betrayal. And you chose to let my son die. Tears spilled down her face. Please. Think of Emilio. I said. That's why this ends now. That night I went to the authorities. The arrest happened quietly at dawn. Camilla did not scream. She did not fight. She simply stared at me as if I had killed her instead of the other way around. Daniel was taken from his office in handcuffs hours later. The trial was long, public, and brutal. Every forged document. Every transfer. Every hidden message was exposed. The life insurance policy sealed her fate beyond any doubt. The courtroom was instant silence as the truth unfolded piece by piece. Sebastian testified. His voice trembled, but he did not look away when he spoke of the empty inhaler. Camilla was convicted of attempted murder, large-scale fraud, conspiracy, and aggravated abuse. The sentence was severe. When the judge read it aloud, Camilla's knees gave out beneath her. Daniel received his own punishment. Justice slow and merciless, finally arrived. But when it was over, when the cameras left and the headlines faded, Sebastian did not feel victorious. He felt hollow. And Emilio, he felt lost. The apartment felt wrong without Camilla's presence. It was quieter than it should have been, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Sebastian moved through the room slowly, leaning on a cane, his body still learning how to exist again. Every step seemed to echo with memories that refused to stay buried. The photos on the wall suddenly felt like lies. Smiles that had once meant happiness now felt staged, rehearsed for a life that had never truly existed. Emilio followed him everywhere like a shadow. At night, the boy crept into Sebastian's bed and curled against his side, terrified of being left alone. He woke up crying from nightmares where his mother disappeared behind iron bars again and again. Sebastian held him through those nights, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of questions he didn't yet have the strength to answer. One afternoon, the DNA test results arrived. Adrian did quietly, without telling Sebastian why. He told him only that the doctors needed to rule something out after the coma. He signed the papers without much thought. When the envelope arrived, sealed and heavy in my hands, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. My fingers trembled as I read the report. Sebastian was not Emilio's biological father. The words blurred through my tears, but they did not change. I read them again and again, hoping they would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They did not. The final betrayal punched deeper than all the others combined. Camilla had not only tried to kill my son. She had also stolen his right to truth from the very beginning. That evening, Sebastian sat at the table across from me, cradling a mug of tea in his weak hands. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "You've been staring at me all day like you're carrying a storm inside." He slid the envelope across the table. He opened it slowly. The silence that followed was unbearable. His eyes moved across the page. 11. Twice. Then his hands began to shake. The color drained from his face in slow, steady waves. "No," he whispered. That's not possible." He reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. He pushed back his chair and stood too quickly. The cane slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. He staggered backward as if struck in the chest. "So all of it was a lie," he said hoarsely. "My marriage. My family. My son." He stood and took hold of his shoulders gently. "Emilio is still your son." "Is not," Sebastian snapped, his voice breaking. "Not by blood. By love," he said. "By every night you stayed up with him. Every fever you treated. Every school play you attended. Blood is not the only thing that creates a family." He closed his eyes, tears spilling freely now. "She used me. For money. For safety. For everything." "Yes," he said. But Emilio did not. Sebastian sank back into the chair, collapsing inward. That night he did not speak to the boy. He shut himself into the bedroom, locking the door. Emilio sat outside it for hours, clutching his toy car, whispering apologies he didn't understand. The next morning, Sebastian didn't come out. By the third day, he grew afraid. He forced the door open and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, unsafe and wide. "He calls for me," he whispered. "All night. I can't answer him." "You don't have to answer as a father right now," he said softly. "Just answer as the man who said him every time he fell. Something in my words reached him. That evening, he opened the bedroom door. Emilio stood in the hallway frozen with fear. Sebastian dropped to one knee in front of him and pulled him into his arms. Nothing that happened was your fault, he told him, his voice trembling. Nothing. But Mommy said Daddy wouldn't want me if he told, Emilio whispered. Sebastian closed his eyes in pain. I will always want you, he said. From that day on, he chose to be Emilio's father again, not by obligation, but by will. Months passed. The legal cases were finished. The money that could be recovered was returned. Some things were lost forever. Sebastian sold the apartment. Too many ghosts lived there. We moved to a quieter town by the edge of the city, where mornings were slower and silence felt like peace instead of punishment. Sebastian opened a small bookstore near the town square. It was modest, warm and filled with shelves that smelled like ink and old paper. Emilio helped organize the books and fell in love with stories about heroes who survived impossible things. And slowly, without anyone noticing when it truly began, healing took root. One afternoon, nearly a year after the trial, a letter arrived from the prison. Sebastian stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Camila had written it herself. Her handwriting was small and controlled, as if she were still trying to dominate the world one line at a time. She spoke of regret. Of loneliness. Of how prison had changed her. She asked to see Emilio one last time. Sebastian folded the letter without finishing it. No, he said. She lost that right. That night, as Emilio slept between us on the couch, he watched my son's face finally soften in rest. Justicia attacking Camila's freedom. But love attacking back what she could never steal. The seasons changed quietly around us. The heat of summer faded into soft autumn winds, and the trees near the bookstores shed their leaves like tired confessions. Life no longer felt like a daily battle for survival. It became something slower, gentler. But beneath that calm the past still breathed. Sebastian worked every day, even when his strength hadn't fully returned. The store opened at 9 each morning and Emilio insisted on helping unlock the door. He considered it their ritual. Sebastian let him turn the key as if it were the most important job in the world. The boy's smile each time was proof that small acts could still repair the wounds. Customers came in gradually. Some were regulars who learned Sebastian's story without being told. Others knew nothing and simply wanted books. Either way, the store filled with quiet footsteps, murmured conversations, and the sound of pages turning. It felt alive in a way their old home never had. At night, however, the silence sometimes grew heavy. Sebastian would sit on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. The scars from 4 lines marked his arms like thin reminders of how close the death had come. Some nights he dreamed of the hospital, of the beeping machines, of air that refused to enter his lungs no matter how hard he tried to breathe. Other nights he dreamed of Camila's face, sometimes loving, sometimes empty, sometimes twisted with hatred. He never spoke of those dreams. Emilio sensed when those nights were bad. He would walk quietly and crawl into Sebastian's bed without a word. He didn't ask questions. He only wrapped his small arms around the man's chest and slept there until morning. And slowly, the nightmares lost their power. One afternoon a man entered the bookstore just before closing. He was tall, dressed simply, and carried himself cautiously, like someone walking into a room who didn't belong in. Sebastian noticed immediately when the man froze at the sight of Emilio behind the counter. The man swallowed hard. I'm looking for Sebastian Morales. Sebastian straightened. That's me. The man hesitated. My name is Andrés. I was Daniel's brother. The air shifted instantly. Sebastian felt the old red rise like fire under his skin. Emilio sensed the tension and stepped back quietly. What do you want? Sebastian asked. Andrés lowered his gaze. Not I didn't know what my brother was doing. Not the money. Not the plan. When he found out the truth after the trial, he reported everything he had. I know, Sebastian said. The investigators report mentioned him. Andrés nodded. He also wanted to return this. He placed a folder on the counter. Inside were photographs. Surveillance images. Bank logs. Evidence the authorities had never uncovered, proof that Daniel had initially planned to frame Sebastian's death as a long-term illness, not an accident. If Emilio had not spoken, Sebastian would already be buried. I live with that, Andrés said quietly. That he didn't see what kind of monster my brother had become. Sebastian studied him for a long moment then closed the folder. You can't change what your brother did, Sebastian said. But you didn't protect him either. That matters. Andrés nodded in silent gratitude and left. That night, Sebastian told Emilio the truth. Not every detail. Not the brutality. But enough. He told him that his mother had been very sick inside her heart. That some people were so trapped by greed and anger they forgot how to love. That the things she did were wrong, but they were not Emilio's fault. Did she ever love me? Emilio asked in a broken whisper. Sebastian pulled him closer. I don't know how she loved, he said honestly. But I know how I do. Weeks later, a package arrived from the prison and marked and official. Inside, Sebastian found childhood photos of Camila holding Emilio, notes she had kept from his school teachers and one final letter. This time, I read it. She admitted everything. Not with remorse but with exhaustion. She spoke of how money had made her feel powerful. Untouchable. She admitted that she had planned to disappear with Daniel once Sebastian was gone. She did not ask for forgiveness. She asked only for Emilio to remember her as something other than a criminal. Sebastian burned the letter. Some memories deserve to be released to us. Another year passed. Emilio grew taller. Louder. Brave. Sebastian grew stronger. He no longer needed his cane. His laughter returned in small pieces and even but sincere. And then one evening he did something he never expected. He invited a woman to dinner. Her name was Lucia. She was a schoolteacher with warm eyes and steady hands. She bought books every week and always asked about Emilio's reading habits. Their connection grew slowly, cautiously, like two people afraid of disturbing fragile ground. Lucia never tried to replace anyone. She simply stood beside them. Emilio accepted her without fear. The boy had learned that love could leave without warning, but he also learned that it could arrive without destruction. One night, as he watched Sebastian set the table with careful precision, he realized something vital. My son was no longer just surviving. He was choosing to live. Lucia became a part of our routine so quietly that one day he realized he could no longer remember what our evenings felt like without her. She never pushed herself into spaces that were still healing. She waited at the edges, patient and observant, allowing Sebastian and Emilio to decide how close she could come. That gentleness was what finally won my trust. On Fridays, she brought warm bread from the bakery near the school. Emilio began to save stories from the bookstore's shelves used for her, stacking them on the counter with proud excitement. Sebastian watched it all with cautious eyes, as if joy were a visitor he was afraid might leave too suddenly if he grew careless. For a long time he did not touch her hand in public. But one evening as the sunset behind the bookstore windows and painted the floor with soft gold, Lucia reached for a novel on the top shelf and lost her balance. Sebastian caught her without thinking. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, steady and sure. Their eyes met. The herald still. Emilio clapped. Does that mean you're officially falling in love now? Lucia laughed in surprise. Sebastian blushed like a shy young man who had forgotten how to be brave. But he did not pull away. Something settled into its place that night. Months later, Lucia moved into the small house with us. She brought only a few boxes and her quiet laughter. The walls filled with new photographs that did not erase the old ones but lived beside them without blame. Healing does not require forgetting. It requires learning where to place the pain so it no longer controls the room. I grew older more noticeably than I wanted to admit. My hands sagged more often. My steps slowed. But my heart felt lighter than it had in years. Watching my son find his way back to Hope was a gift I don't believed impossible. Then one morning a call came from the prison. Camila had fallen ill. The doctor said it was serious. Sebastian listened silently as the information was delivered. When the call ended, I stood by the window for a long time without speaking. Lucia said nothing. She simply slipped her hand into his. That night, I told me I was thinking of visiting. Why? I asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe to close something that still feels unfinished. 2 days later, I went alone. I returned before nightfall. I did not speak of what was said between them. I only told me that when she looked at him, her eyes finally showed fear instead of control. Not fear of dying, but fear of being forgotten. I didn't forgive her, I said quietly. But I told her I survived. That seemed to be enough. Weeks later the letter arrived. Camila had died. Emilio did not cry when Sebastian told him. He nodded slowly and asked if that meant the bad dreams would finally stop. Sebastian answered honestly that some dreams would stay, but others would fade. That night, Emilio slept without waking even once. The following year passed gently. Lucia and Sebastian were married in a small ceremony by the lake. Emilio stood between them holding both their hands as if sealing the promise with his presence alone. He watched with tears that were no longer only born of sorrow. In the crowd, no one whispered about scandal. No one spoke of prisons, betrayal, or death. People spoke of books, of children, of weather and laughter and cake. Normal life had returned. Not the old normal we once believed in, but a better one built from choice instead of illusion. One afternoon, long after the wedding, as the bookstore prepared to close, Emilio found a small box tucked away in the back storage room. Inside were old objects Sebastian had never unpacked after the trial, his old watch, a cracked photo frame, and the empty inhaler. Emilio stared at it with wide eyes. This saved you, didn't it? He asked. Sebastian knelt beside him. It's old Abe. Emilio talked for a moment. Then said, then I'm glad it didn't. Because if you had died, I would have lost my real dad. Sebastian's breath caught painfully in his chest. That night, I stood alone in the backyard and buried the inhaler beneath the roots of the old tree behind the house. When I finished, he pressed his palm against the soil and whispered goodbye, not to the machine, but to the life that had nearly ended there. One final storm came that winter. Heavy rain pounded the roof through the night. Winds shouted against the walls. We gathered in the living room with candles and blankets as if returning to an ancient ritual of protection. Lucia brewed tea. Emilio told stories by candlelight. Sebastian listened with a soft smile. And in that moment he understood something he had been afraid to admit. If Emilio had never whispered the truth in that hospital room, my son would not be alive. Sometimes justice comes in the shape of a lamp. And sometimes it arrives in the voice of a child speaking against fear. By morning the storm had passed. The world outside was clean, spring returned gently, as if the world itself had learned to walk more softly around us. The tree in the backyard bloomed for the first time since we had buried the inhaler beneath its roots, and Sebastian joked that it had finally learned how to breathe properly. Emilio took that idea very seriously. Every morning before school, he ran outside to water the tree, whispering encouragement to it as if it were a living promise. Life settled into a rhythm that no longer felt borrowed or fragile. The bookstore thrived. Lucia organized a small reading club for children on weekends, and Emilio became its most enthusiastic member, though he pretended to be embarrassed by that fact. Sebastian watched them from behind the counter with quiet pride, his hands always busy, his heart finally unguarded. I spent more time resting now. The years had caught up with me, but I did not fight them anymore. I sat in the chair by the window most afternoons, knitting slow, and even rows of scarves that no one truly needed. But I liked the movement. It made time feel softer. One day, Emilio brought home a school assignment that asked the children to write about their family. He sat at the table chewing on his pencil for nearly an hour, tongue pressed against his lip in deep concentration. When he was finished, he handed the paper to Sebastian first. Sebastian read silently. Then he stood up, walked outside, and didn't come back in for several minutes. When he returned, his eyes were wet, but he was smiling. That night, he let me read it. My family is made of people who stay. My grandma stayed when everyone was crying. My dad stayed when he was scared. My mom Lucia stays even when I'm loud. My other mom went away because she was sick inside. But it wasn't the sickness. It was the reason they fought it. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. Later that year, Sebastian asked me to move my things into the small bedroom near the living room. The stairs were becoming difficult for me, he said gently. I protested, of course. Mothers always do. But in the end, I accepted. It felt good to be closer to the sounds of everyday life again, to hear Lucia humming while she cooked, to hear Emilio laughing as he ran through the house, to hear Sebastian's steady footsteps that once had been so uncertain. On my birthday they threw me a party I had not asked for. The house filled with neighbors, customers from the bookstore, and friends we had gathered without even noticing it. There was cake. There were candles. There was music that belonged to a future instead of the past. Lucia brought out a photo album she had made secretly over the years. The first pages el hospital images I barely remembered consenting to. Then there were photos of the trial days, the move, the bookstore opening, the wedding, and quiet, ordinary mornings that had somehow become precious simply because we had survived long enough to call them normal. At the end of the album, there was an empty page. For what's next, Lucia said. I didn't cry. I laughed. Time continued its steady work. Emilio grew into a lanky teenager who pretended not to care about books while secretly reading more than either of us. Sebastian's hair gained strands of silver that stubbornly refused to die. Lucia's laughter stayed warm and certain. Andy watched it all with the peaceful stubbornness of a woman who had once thought her story ended in a hospital hallway. One evening, years later, Emilio stood at the backyard tree and called Sebastian outside. It's taller than the roof now, he said proudly. Sebastian put his arm around the boy's shoulders. So are you. Emilio hesitated. Do you ever think about her? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. I think about what happened, he said honestly. But not with anger anymore. Anger is heavy. I don't need to carry it. And me? Emilio asked. Do you ever think about what you lost? Sebastian looked down at him. I think about what I kept. That was the truth I chose to live with. Years after the trial, long after the world forgot the scandal and moved on to new tragedies, I dreamed again of the hospital. But this time the room was bright and empty. The machines were silent. The bed was clean. No one was dying there anymore. When I woke, I understood. Fear had finally loosened its grip on my bones. On my last birthday, I asked Sebastian to push my chair into the backyard beneath the old tree. The leaves moved gently in the wind, whispering in a way that reminded me of that long-forgotten beeping sound. Only this time the sound did not carry dread. It carried life. Emilio sat beside me reading aloud in a voice that had grown deeper than I was ready for. Lucia watched us from the porch, her hands wrapped around a warm cup. Sebastian stood behind us, his shadow stretching over a tree of us like shelter. He reached back and squeezed his hand. Long ago in a cold hospital room, a frightened child had chosen to speak the truth. Because of that choice, my son lived. Because of that whisper, a family remade itself from broken pieces. And because of that single brave voice, every ordinary day that followed became something extraordinary. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real.